Okay, to review the assembly constraints for the cylinder clamp, we're going to take it apart and put it back together. Now the assignment started when you grounded this one to the origin, but we're going to take it apart. What happens if it doesn't get grounded to the origin? So we're going to kind of start this one over, take it in one step at a time. First thing, make sure we get the assembly planes visible. And first thing we want to do is to constrain this component to those planes so everything is kind of oriented around those planes. This one's got a lot of things going on about the center of the part, so we're going to use that to help. Things kind of get in the way here. We don't typically bring a whole bunch of parts in kind of for that reason, but we'll kind of work with them today. Now, the next thing we got to do is take these parts in order, and we're going to kind of think in terms of how we want this to move after we get it put together. So for this part, it needs to go in stay in the center of the part. I'm going to use that center plane. Oops. To match up with this center plane. And we don't want it to flip. And the next thing we know is that we want a couple of axes to line up. Applying these constraints, I always like to kind of make sure that each one works. So this one doesn't move. This one's free to rotate. And if it's set up right, this one's free to extend as we wanted it to be. We'll come back and check that definitely later. Next one to kind of work in here is this part. Again, we'd like it to be in the center. And as it was constructed, we're not using the adaptivity anymore. So I'm going to turn it off because it can lead to complications. Let's get the center plane back on. Like we did before, I'm going to center it on that plane. And I'm going to constrain the holes so they line up. And make sure it's working. Okay. Now, if everything else is working all right, we don't have anything over constrained, I should be able to line up the axis for that hole, the axis of this hole, and at that point now we've got the basic mechanism set up to work with. Now, a good thing to check was this one here is intended to be stopping as it collides there. And so that was done in the subassembly. And that was done by setting a constraint to limits. Yep. Don't need to save any changes there. Okay. Now then it's just kind of a matter of getting the rest of the fasteners put in place. So here we can kind of watch the order a little bit. And I'm going to constrain this first. And it is upside down. Oh, no, there's the hex head. It's right. A lot easier to constrain those two parts together before it gets inserted. Same thing on the other side. Now, the tutorial that was used to create these went through and did some construction work, so we've got the right reference geometry in place. So now for constraining this, we just have to use the axes and a second set of axes. And it minimizes the constraints, but still gets the job done. Now for the front, here we want the pins to pretty much be centered on the part too. So it's just going to be handier to use that center plane with an axis to accomplish both. Same thing. Now we'll finish up with the rings. I'm going to use the insert constraint, that edge, match up with that edge. That edge. And everything's back together.